Many people believe that Putin is the only reason that we don't have a huge escalation in Ukraine, because anyone else in Russia would have, we know that Putin tries to calm down the situation. He tries to negotiate, to talk. He doesn't say that I don't care about the United States, I don't care about. He tries to, even with Europeans, he talks with them.
He doesn't do
That
any good.
that's the reason that many people feel that they can support Putin, because Putin is the voice of reason after all in this huge sort of mess in Ukraine.
Well, but it doesn't do any good. You see, I still think there's a risk that Putin's approach will not de-escalate the situation, but will make the escalation stronger and more dangerous. And I think that's what's happened over the course of this war. It's the escalations from the West have always risen. You have to remember, every weapon system that we would not send, we sent. And we even attacked their strategic bombing force. And again, Putin just turned away from it and played like it didn't happen. Well, that's not a deterrent from a worse provocation.
Because he doesn't feel that is an existential threat to Russia so far. It seems that
Well,
he doesn't feel that way.
Russian war doctrine did. And as commander in chief, his responsibility was to respond in a very forceful way to that attack. And he got out of it by saying, well, it really wasn't a military attack, it was a terrorist act. And under the war doctrine, the terrorist act isn't included, so I don't have to do anything. So he just redefined what had happened. In fact, he denied what had happened. It's not a military attack on Russia, it was a terrorist attack. So when you show that kind of irresolution, weakness, repeatedly, you encourage more and more escalation from the other side. And that's what's happened for 4 years. Uh, in fact, it was all his efforts with the Minsk agreement that forced him eventually to intervene. If he had taken back Donbass in 2014, when they voted to come back into Russia, because it's formerly part of Russia, he refused. He took Crimea and left them out. Well, that's where the war originated. If he had said, okay, you're now part of us, who in the hell was going to go attack Russia? Instead, he got himself in a situation where he had to go attack Ukraine. Well, this is not smart. He should have said, okay, they voted just like Crimea. We took Crimea in. The same arguments apply to taking them in. That would have prevented the war. But to have a war then, NATO, US would have had to use Ukraine to attack Russia. Well, then Russia would have been under attack. Instead, he gets himself in a fix. So he has to go to defend Donbass. He has to attack Ukraine. Well, that's not smart.
The economy of Russia was not prepared, Paul, in 2014
But
to go in
why?
that direction,
Why wasn't it? He
because they were
said,
in the process of reducing their dependence on dollar and improving the
no,
relationship with the
no,
BRICS
he
countries.
would not recognize a threat. He refuses to take the threat seriously. And they're so used to living with a threat that they just accept it. He, he had plenty of time. Look, he's known since 2007, 2008. In 2007, at the Munich Security Conference, he said, we don't accept American hegemony. There's no more unipolar world. So laid down the gauntlet. So the first thing we did was organize the invasion of South Ossetia. And we trained the Georgian army, armed them, sent them in. They killed Russian peacekeepers. And he had to rush back from the Beijing Olympics and get the army and go in there. So he knew he's known since then. They're out to get him. And he proved by his behavior in Georgia that he was not rebuilding the Soviet empire because he defeated the army and had the country in his hands. He could have said, okay, now Georgia, we put Georgia back into Russia where it belongs. And he just took the army and went home and left them alone. So I don't know how many times he has to prove he's not trying to rebuild the Soviet empire. But the whole thing has been handled so poorly. I
Paul,
was
you
just,
said 2007 and 2008. We
yeah,
have to remember that BRICS was, started to work in 2009.
yeah,
When Putin he somehow felt that they need some sort of a new institution to
sure.
organize the whole,
Mhm.
confrontation between the East and the West, because he saw nothing coming from the West. There is no, friendship going,
You're
happening.
proving my point. You're proving my point. He's known since then. And but he's evaded the issue directly. Yeah, he created BRICS in order to have some way out of the out of the Western system. Uh, but they should have been working on that years before. It's I think there's some sort of reality, the acceptance of reality problem in the Kremlin. They just can't accept the reality that the West is out to get them. And so they're never prepared. I've never known Putin to be prepared for anything. I mean, he wasn't prepared for the invasion of South Ossetia. How could he not be? He wasn't prepared for the overthrow of the government in Ukraine in 2014. How could he not be? He was at the Olympics, the Sochi Olympics. It was more
Paul,
important. It was more important what was going on in the Sochi Olympics. We're showing that
because
we're,
they were dealing with the chaos that CIA created in Russia, in Chechnya. They were dealing with that problem during those years.
well,
It wasn't that easy for Russia
that should
to.
have told him way back then. That's even longer he should have known. And the fact that he's so unprepared that he had to enter into Donbass with 150,000 soldiers, a large percentage of which were the Wagner uh, group, who aren't even directly part of the Russian army at that time. And the Ukrainian has an army of 600,000, 800,000, and he's goes in with 150. He was totally unprepared. And so either they have excessive hopes that negotiation works, and they've had it now for 20 years. It doesn't work. And this really doesn't make any sense to me. And
Paul, they were fighting.
the longer this goes on, the now you could say, okay, he's really very Machiavellian, and he's using this to break up NATO and break NATO away from Washington. Uh, because they won't be able to come together, and NATO is not supporting Trump's peace deal, and uh, so what I'm really doing here is I'm just outsmarting them because I'm going to break up the Western Alliance. This is going to break up the Western Alliance because the Americans want peace, the Europeans won't give it. you could make that argument that he's just smarter than me. He sees beyond, and he's gonna play this in a way that breaks up the Western alliance. Then he didn't have to worry about NATO being on his borders.
Oh, Paul, let's see the bigger picture. Assume Putin coming to power in 2000, in the year 2000, and with all the difficulties, coming from the Yeltsin and his government, Russia was totally destroyed when he came to power. And
Yeah.
internally at war with Chechnya, 10 years, during 10 years, he was trying to put an end to the conflict, the internal conflict in
Hmm.
Russia with Chechnya, which was created by CIA. You
Right.
can imagine how the economy was so weak in during those years, and they cannot, right after getting, putting an end to the conflict with Chechnya, they face the new conflict in Ukraine. How can we imagine that the economy was not prepared for that? In
I don't.
2014, it
I
was
don't agree
too
with that.
soon for Russia to get involved in a new conflict in Ukraine.
Well, I they got involved in a war in Georgia, and they did
Georgia was
fine.
totally different. Georgia is a smaller country. The size of the army is not even comparable to
It
what
was an
they had
American.
in
It was
Ukraine.
An American trained and equipped army, and they went in under our direction. Um, so I don't accept that argument. Look what Stalin did. I mean, he was faced with an invasion across a 1,000-mile front, and everything was collapsing. They were pushed back to Stalingrad, to Moscow. It didn't stop him from producing an army that defeated the Wehrmacht. So I don't accept that. I don't accept that argument. Everybody is so busy apologizing for Putin, they don't see the risk in his policy. And the policy has shown us the risk over and over. And I think that it's totally possible to be defensive of Putin and to understand he's the one trying to do the right thing, not the West, but still to be realistic about the risk in his approach. And that's all I'm trying to do is just introduce a little realism that that this approach of his is risky. It could have spun out of control all along the way. And I'm still convinced if it continues, they're going to have another 4 years of this. It's going to spin out of control. And and of
Paul,
course,
Paul,
yeah,
I've never been to Russia. I don't know what's going on there. What is the public opinion about what's going on? But in my opinion, the priorities for the Russian government, for Vladimir Putin, is the economy of Russia first, then the war in Ukraine. You know, he cares a lot about the casualties on the part of Russians as well. But in my opinion, the first priority is the economy. Putting all these together, it seems to me that Russia during the war in Ukraine, you've mentioned in 120,000 soldiers in Ukraine 2022, April 2022, because as Larry mentioned, he was trying to put pressure on the West. He didn't get it. He said, let's go to hell. I remember he said, let's go to hell with the West. I'm going to do it. And but after all, even today, the priority of Russia is the economy of Russia, more important than anything else, because that can bring some sort of chaos, discontent in Russia within the society. If the society is not happy with the economy, that could, that could be a huge
Neiman,
problem for the
just a
government.
minute. Look, the trouble with the Russian economy is Putin. He defends that central bank director, that utterly stupid woman that allowed the West to take $300 billion of Russian foreign reserves, the stupid woman that keeps the interest rate 16, 17%, squashing the economy. Everybody in Russia is complaining about that woman, and he defends her. So she's the one hurting the Russian economy. You tell me what economy is going to function with 16, 17% interest rates? The return on investment can't cover the loan. And she's his person. She's been under attack all these years. She's still there. If the Russian economy is suffering, it's from the central bank policies, and it's from the dilatory, slow exclusion of or removal of Russia from the West. It took them so long. And of course, what do we know about that woman? She is pro-American, trained by American neoliberal economists, and she's Atlanticist integrationist. She wants Russia part of the West. So she gives Russia to the West. Look, here's Russia about to make one of Putin's many mistakes. Instead of having taken Donbass so that the Ukrainians would have to invade Russia, he's about to invade Russia, and the central bank director doesn't have enough sense to get Russia's assets out of the hands where they can be frozen and now confiscated. She didn't have enough sense to pull those assets back and put them somewhere safe. No. Well, if you got a central bank director that incompetent, how are you going to have an economy? So once again, when I make these criticisms, I don't mean them as a personal attack on Putin. I just mean there are places where there have been fundamental mistakes made, or so it seems to me, and that we can't let defensiveness of Putin keep us from seeing it. You know, the whole time I've always said he's the best leader the world has. He's a humane person. He's trying to avoid nuclear war. That's true. He has humanity in him. He's not a Netanyahu, you know, or like any of the American neoconservatives. He's not that kind of person. He's humane, and I'm all for him. But I can still see or think I see, I may be wrong, but it looks to me like uh, he's created a bigger problem by not being decisive. And that it was the lack of decisiveness is the reason, as Larry Johnson was saying, so many American generals said, oh, we can beat Russia. They're losing, Ukraine's winning. It was because they didn't see any decisive action. No one, I don't think anyone thought Ukraine can withstand 4 years of conflict with Russia. I just want to remind you again, Stalin, the Red Army, in 2 years destroyed the Wehrmacht and freed up thousands of miles of Russia from Germans and Eastern Europe. From Stalingrad to Berlin was half the time Putin has spent in Donbass.